Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Neighborhood News Network. George Webb, Michigan beat everybody. He's wearing the sweatshirt of champions. I don't know if he ate his breakfast at champions today, but he's definitely got the sweatshirt of champions on, much to my chagrin as an Ohio State fan. But we got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to get into some Marcia McNutt, who is this president of the NAS, the National Academy of Sciences, and what's her role that happened with the pandemic. We're going to be getting into the Michigan charrette that's coming up. We got a nice surprise with the location for everyone. We got what's up with the mainstream media, mass layoffs. We got Trump versus E. Jean Carroll, and we got some viruses used for gene therapy. All on the docket today. George Webb is the man of the hour, the couple hours. George Webb, how you doing today?
Great, Andy. And I know you have a little bit of ringing in your ears. And it's not always, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a karma doc. I'm not a 101 real America frontline doctor. I'm not a real 101st Airborne doctor. But I get to wear the shirt because she doesn't want to go on TV. And I'm her stand-in. I mean, that's a pretty big step down for the stand-in for the real karma doc. But anyway, when you have the ringing in the ears and you have a little bit of a heart condition, especially arrhythmia, sometimes those are related around circulation. And it's your mind actually trying to syncopate itself to the sounds around it. Mm-hmm. So that's a really interesting area of research. So
it does come and go, and it definitely does. I have a little earache, an ear infection. I don't know. I was traveling lately. My brother has the same issue, so we're blaming the hotel at the moment. George Webb thinks it's more some CIA agents may have been in our hotel room before
the Browns lose, right? Joe Flacco. I'm just saying, Joe Flacco got some Benjamins out of that one.
That is true. There was a big. You talk about the Deep Artolos and them being mobbed up. Maybe there was something happening in Houston against Cleveland the other day as well.
Andy, you wouldn't have thrown those 2 interceptions. I don't care, even if right now you wouldn't have thrown those 2 interceptions. So anyway, so getting back to McNutt, this really goes to the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey. And anytime you have a crossover of government, which is a huge investor in geological surveying technology, and then you combine that with warfare, right? Like during World War II, there was a massive search by the USGS for oil. Because of the war machine, you can't depend on foreign imports anymore. Now, fortunately, America already had a lot of oil fields, but this became one of the key reasons for developing offshore oil technology. There she is doing the Deepwater Horizon. This is McNutt doing the Deepwater Horizon. So offshore becomes very important, and McNutt is offshore oil. When you go to the dictionary and you look for offshore drilling, you see McNutt's picture. And the reason why this is important is if you're a banking family that's into oil and gas, like the Rothschilds have been in the Black Sea for 150 years, sometimes when you have a war, like, I don't know, the Ukraine war, you can start diverting a lot of resources into mapping, geosounding. Here's when she was working sort of for the private USGS, which was David Packard's thing in Monterey, California, where they had a deep well horizon kind of sonic geophysics kind of capability.
So they go around like with the environmental group and map the ocean floors for like these oil companies and where to drill exactly. Is that what she's popping around the world doing?
Sometimes they're with the environmental companies. Most of the time they're with the oil companies to make sure there's safe drilling. But what I'm saying is that these maps that were developed in World War I and World War II, when the Navy started going toward oil, those are all areas that are discoverable. That's your next $1 billion. So if you make friends with somebody who is the head of the GSS or USGS, or you put somebody into somebody running the USGS, it's free research. Most of the money involved in extractive resources. This is my area. Finally, we get to an area where I know something. Earth resources in Australia was kind of my first use of supercomputer type technology for for creating these layouts of these plumes of oil or gas or even metal now with some of the bigger muon and neutrino detection and so forth. My point is that McNutt would be the perfect person if you had her on side to take the money of the government money for looking for all these resources, because that's money you don't have to spend. 80% sometimes of the barrel of oil that you have or the gas that you get is money that was spent looking for it. So if you can get somebody else to look for it, you tremendously increase your profits. And that's really the story of McNutt. No matter how you slice it, her whole career is oil. And going back all the way when she went to MIT in '82 and went into geophysics, I worked with a company called Sierra Geophysics out of Seattle to sell Sun workstations in Australia, and then back in the United States off the Pacific Ocean.
Mhm.
But there was another one, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, that also had these sounding craft. And you can what really helps, is sort of like a bonanza, is an earthquake, because trace gases seep out through these seams in the Earth's atmosphere, and that's in the Earth's crust, and that's where you find oil. That's also where you find minerals, because it's sort of the last, cracks, if you will. And when you have an earthquake, it's like somebody smashing glass. You get 1,000 fractures. So it's like 1,000 new oil wells. And the problem with warfare, when you bring in warfare now, and people doing underground testing of atomic weapons, for instance, which we did until Kennedy signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty in '62, why don't we just do some testing with the nuclear weapons near fault lines and make the fault lines bigger and make all the cracks and fissures so that we can make tremendous amounts of money? And so you see there's an overlap here. And so this is the story of Marcia McNutt. Now, what's super interesting is the family she marries into is the Hoffman family. And the Hoffman-LaRoche drugs, we'll get into in a little bit, but Hoffman-LaRoche is the people. Roche Diagnostics makes first of all, Hoffman-LaRoche made the PCR machine. They bought Carrie Mullis's machine, Cetus PCR machine, for testing all this stuff. And then they also make the diagnostic strip for coronavirus. So there's tremendous amounts of profits here. And the oil companies tend to get into, because the drug business is a very process-oriented business, and it's not much, especially in this generative business, what they call, like Genentech, which Roche bought, where you're actually cooking. Basically, you're like fermenting, like beer. Germans have been doing beer for a long time. It's the drug industry is a lot like that process industry, and so is oil. So there's a lot of overlaps here that we'll get into with Marcia McNutt.
So she wrote this memo. I'm pulling it up on the. Just go.
She received the memo, the most famous smoking gun memo of, "Hey, coronavirus is a bioweapon" memo, right? And she buried. Did she tell Trump about this? This is in February 4th of 2020, and the person who brought this to my attention, the McNutt memo, I think history will show this will be more famous than the Dreyfus letter. It'll be more famous than the Zimmerman telegram.
You just want me to read it real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So here's the McNutt memo dated February 3rd, 2020. So this is right when like the pandemic's kind of supposedly breaking out. We guess in Wuhan in September, but yeah, here we go. The Marcia McNutt memo. Subject: rapid response assessment of 2019 NCOV data needs. In support of the Office of Science and Technology's National Science and Technology Committee rapid research response work for 2019 NCOV response and the administration's effort to characterize and provide evidence-based assessments for outbreak response efforts, I'm writing to ask the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to rapidly examine information and identify data requirements that would help determine the origins of 2019 COVID, specifically from an evolutionary / structural biology standpoint. I also ask NASEM to consider whether this should be included more temporarily and geographically diverse clinical isolate sequences, etc. Although a widely disputed paper, which I have and we'll be getting into in a second, titled Uncanny Similarity of Unique Inserts in the 2019 nCoV Spike Protein to HIV-1 GP120 in the HAG, HAG, posted on the preprint server BioRxiv last week, has been withdrawn. The response to that manuscript highlights the need to determine information and data requirements as quickly as possible to better perform and validate such analysis of origin. These questions are important not only for this current situation, but to inform future outbreak preparation and better understand animal/human and environmental transmission aspects of coronaviruses. We all know that part, but that line right there, the uncanny similarity of unique inserts into 2019 COVID spike protein to HIV GP120. It's pretty much like they were watching George Webb, some Paul Cottrell, and the reporting on the work that you guys were doing. George Webb, can you dig into this?
Well, this isn't me at this point. This is Paul Cottrell. This is what made Paul Cottrell famous, right? Is the 5 HIV inserts, and this is how Paul Cottrell became a nobody from a nobody medical school student to one of the most famous personalities on the web, because he saw this paper and made it popular and caused this uproar, if you will, and this paper to be, they have to create some documentation that we did look at it. But just getting back to how does an HIV protein, especially a protein that's critical into sort of like the crowbar and the pry bar of, molecular genetics, how does that get into the trunk, right, of coronavirus when it's never been there before? And, we've got the crime, of the pry bar and the crowbar left at the scene of the crime, so somebody has to explain this, right? So the point here, and this Cottrell talked about the various proteins and so forth, and how that was even worse. It was 5 different tools left at the scene of the crime, and, they were in the trunk, after the crime. So the understanding how these tools help is critical to understanding how to make something that was before just a common cold into something that's highly effective and that you could build a pandemic around.
Mm-hmm.
And the experience here, if you remember, of Roche and Hoffman, right? Hoffman-Roche. Hoffman, the company, starts out with vitamin C in Germany, but then they go into their Roche uses slave labor, Nazi slave labor. They send some of the Jewish kids to the United States that work for Hoffman and Roche. And these are going to be some of the kids that get the assets of Hoffman Roche after the war is over, just in case Germany loses the war. But they go into HIV research big time. And they are the ones probably the most that account most for what they call the cocktail strategy. The reason why Cottrell always says when there's 3 spikes on something or 5 spikes is because of this cocktail strategy to try to cure HIV. It's called HAART, HAART. But the idea is, let's understand how the life cycle of infection works for HIV. And there's 6 basic key steps And in a day and a half, you can go from infection to replication, which is fast for a virus. Just saying, it's fast. And what they did with HIV and what HIV allowed, the whole HIV epidemic allowed Hoffman and Roche to basically take apart the virus life cycle and develop 6 different classes of drugs. Then you can use these drugs over and over and over again for all different types of viruses. So it's the use case, right? It's the general model. It's sort of like building model airplanes when you're a kid, that then you can go on to make bigger airplanes or doing wind tunnel testing or whatever. And my
So you
point
need
here,
this like HIV insert kind of as like a building block to build your engineer your viruses almost.
well, it's like taking a car completely apart in your garage in Toledo, Andy, or a Jeep would be a better example. You go down to your Jeep factory. If you remember, the old Jeeps could be built by 4 guys in about an hour. It was made to be, tinker toy type construction. That's the same sort of thing. In like 8 steps, 4 guys could build a Jeep in an hour. That's the same understanding that Roche did in taking apart the HIV infection of a immune cell. And every point along the way, entering the cell, right, which is, let's say, the doors on the car, and being able to do the lock picking, that's important. But then you got to get in the car and start the car. And then so you have to know about the battery, the electrical system, and you have to know about the motor, and you have to know about gasoline and all these other things. So it's a system of 6, 7 things. The HIV pandemic, and I'm not saying it was created, I'm not saying that people irradiated blood supplies and deliberately gave those to hemophiliacs and other people on immunotherapy, but it could be, because we know that happened. But that allows you to understand when the immune cells go awry, causing HIV, and then an HIV pandemic, and Dr. Fauci's right in the middle of all this, allows tremendous amounts of cash to be dumped on you so that you can figure out the immune cell to the nth degree. And Hoffman Roche was at the very center of that. Not a little bit over here. They were at the exact epicenter of that. Hoffman Roche also had these ties with Donald Rumsfeld, who created the AIDS, HIV epidemic, right, in '83 with PEPFAR. He also does Tamiflu, which is the thing that you need to stop these flus or these influenzas. So you can see here that Hoffman Roche, again, going back to the Nazis, is where they get their slave labor, right, is sort of getting these secrets out. Now, I'm not saying they went to Minnesota where Hoffman, who later marries McNutt. I'm not saying that's what happened. But there is a suspicious death of her husband after they have the 2 children and the inheritance is assured. Now the husband is killed, Marcel Hoffman, and now she, becomes the National Academy of Sciences director. And she's in this incredible position to knock down the Paul Cottrell discovery. So it's an amazing situation that this person would go from oil and gas and mining and then be in this position to knock down the scientific minds like Cottrell right at this most important part of American history.
And it's do you think she has a Q level clearance? Do you think she has access to that type of information, that level? Is she that level personnel?
Well, you'll see some memos that I produced for this show. I put them in the chat where she's really pushing the Ukrainian research, and she's got some 300 research projects going on in Ukraine. She's urging us to pour the gasoline on the fire in Ukraine. I don't know the nature of all these things, but there's just a massive amount of money being poured into a war zone. And when I see them, normally that's exactly the opposite of what happens. Normally you pull back the scientists and the lab work away from the war zone because you don't want the laboratory to be destroyed, right? You either bury it if you have no other place, or you move it out of the country just to secret it Same thing with your scientists. You don't want to put your scientists in a bombing zone. But she did the exact opposite. She's pouring money into this Crimea area and into the Black Sea. Goes back 150 years with the Rothschild investment into the Black Sea. And
oops, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, the British Geological Services also became famous in the 1800s, going all the way back with the Rothschilds for this exact same reason. This isn't something that we thought of in America with USGS. The Rothschilds have been close partners with the British Geographic Service since the days of a guy named Alfred Nobel, who later, there is a thing called the Nobel Prize named after him, right? And there's the Nobel oil fields in the Baku. So this is nothing new here in Crimea, but it just seems like an echo of the past of us dumping all this American cash into sort of this Rothschild sort of namesake, if you will.
Well, here, I got a little picture for you from her Twitter page as well. I had on the screen. Here's her receiving her honorary doctorate from the National Academy of Sciences from Ukraine. And that is important if she was doing work on the coronavirus, because one of the things that we were all highlighting when the Russia invaded Ukraine was the fact that there was U.S. Funded biolabs all over the place in Ukraine doing this work, and the National Academy of Sciences in Ukraine definitely had access to those biolabs and had access to that research, that work. And we saw Metabiota over there, Black and Veatch, Hunter Biden doing his thing. So I'm wondering if she has some connections to the COVID research inside those biolabs, and some connections to Hunter Biden and some of these Metabiota as well.
Yeah, I think from her time in MIT, MIT kind of throws a cloak of a speciality around their chosen scientists, and then they kind of insert them. Tom Lauer at NIH is the key guy, Tony Fauci's boss, that sort of gives these people their gravitas. Once you throw that cloak around them, that they're an MIT scientist, sort of a Josh Lederberg. Mark Kulak talks about Josh Lederberg. Then they seem to get their careers take off. Carrie Mullis at Cetus Corporation or wherever you want to talk about. But this is a classic situation where there is a very, very strong relationship between Ukraine and her. And the great thing about warfare from a bioweapon feedback is you don't have to ask permission from a corpse to do an autopsy. One of the key things that you want if you do disperse bioagents, one of the key things you want is to do autopsies, especially of your organs. You're filtering organs. And again, I'm no karma doc. I'm not the 101. I'm not the real karma doc. I wonder if there ever would be an occasion where you could go meet the real karma doc. It's coming up, Andy, in Michigan in 1 month. I will tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit. But you get the point is I don't have to ask a dead Russian soldier to do liver slices of his liver or to do slides of his kidneys, right? And so or his lungs, or to take the blood samples or something. He's there on the plate. It's time. It's lunchtime. It's time to carve. So I think a lot of this money that's being sent with this tremendous flow of capital for research into a war zone, the only thing that really makes sense is sort of some type of geosounding in the Crimea area. You could say you're looking for submarines. You can always say you're looking for drone submarines. While you're doing that, and all these explosions are occurring, even small explosions, Andy, are a geophysics. They set off little tiny charges in a grid array. And even that would cause seismic waves, and the seismic waves travel at different speeds through different materials, and that allowed you to find the oil and the gas. Even small explosions. So war is a geophysicist's dream. You can't ask for a better situation. Matter of fact, you can even start calling in missiles and artillery strikes in areas that you believe are potentially rich in extractive resources, and you don't even have to supply the weapons or the explosives. You get the other guys to call it in. So if you're running the intelligence operation, you can just start, and it doesn't even have to be missiles. It could be kinetic warheads. It could be 155 millimeter howitzers. I can, a geophysicist like her is smart enough. I can just in one day chart a whole field just by placing different rounds in different parts of a field. This may be what's actually happening in Ukraine. We know that Kolomoisky, who has got designs in the eastern half of Ukraine, the Donbass, rich in titanium, rich in cobalt, rich in oil and gas. We know that there's huge new finds of gas off the Crimean, and we know that the Rothschild family, that's their first dabbling in oil, even before the internal combustion engine. So, and we have them there now, which is very interesting. So, is there a connection to the Hoffmans with her husband dying so soon? And it's a tragic story. I mean, she has two little girls, and the husband dies almost immediately under tragic circumstances.
I was putting some stuff up on the screen while you were talking. She was definitely involved in that like, that's where this email comes from, kind of that famous oversight board with Fauci and Jeremy Ferrar that was kind of controlling the pandemic. And she was also on the Human Genome International Oversight Board, the Heritable Human Genome Editing. She was on the International Oversight Board with Jeremy Ferrar from the Wellcome Trust himself. So she definitely has some connections going on with the pandemic and the control and the release of the information. And here you have the FOIA reveals another secret call on COVID's origin. The details are redacted. Zhao forward Ferrar's message to NAS President Marcia McNutt and President Trump's Office of Science and Technology, Kevin Drogmeyer, who I believe was a person who signed the bottom of that email. McNutt later forwarded the email with an attachment called summary.february7th.pdf. So she was the one that ended up forwarding the mass email, I guess.
Yeah, and they quickly formed an attack strategy to undermine the credibility of the scientists that did the work. Again, Kulak gets the credit for this, but they immediately started undermining. But when you do a sequence, it's not like, George, here's a Rorschach drawing, an ink blot drawing. Tell us what you think. And I could say, well, it looks like a seagull, or it looks like a Mercedes-Benz, or it looks like a BMW. No, you read the sequence out, and it's like me saying, what are the letters in this book? If I say this is Stan Pottinger's book about the last final solution virus that he wrote for Henry Kissinger, the last Nazi, but he describes, and then I say, well, read this sequence of letters. Well, that is not going to be up to debate, right? It's not going to be up to debate. It is what it is. And that sequence came out HIV glycoprotein 120. So there's no debate here. The HIV sequences were in there. The only reason they retracted the paper is they said they would ruin the lives of the people if they didn't retract it. And then sometimes they take the science and then they have an infiltrator go in and say he falsified data, or in order to knock down the story, or they'll say that they cut corners, or they say that they'll, they have one person on the team that they get to that says, oh, I falsified data, or I did this, or I did that, or I cut corners, or I got lazy and it got late at night, so I just put the sequence of GP120 in there. This didn't happen. This really was the GP120 sequence. And this is the smoking gun of HIV. This points directly back to Hoffman Roche. There's no question. There's no question here whatsoever what it is. And there's no reason for it to be there other than it was put there. So it is like a hot pistol that you have in your trunk, Andy. You're driving away from the scene of the crime and you have this hot pistol or hot rifle. It's reasonable suspicion for the officer to go, hey, Andy, I smell gunpowder. I see that were at the Texas School Book Depository 5 minutes ago. You're traveling extremely high rate of speed. You've hit 6 police cars on your way out. I have reasonable suspicion now to look into the trunk. And then I open the trunk up and I see, oh, there's a Mauser rifle and there's 16 spent cartridges that have been thrown in the back. Again, this is that sort of smoking gun. This is pointing toward McNutt, knocking down this critical early Cottrell discovery, and it deserves more attention. And this PDF file, February 7th, is their plan to knock this down. Now, I don't have that PDF, but
I'm trying to find it right now.
I don't think it's available. But if you can find it, great. But my point is, it's going to be sanitized for the public consumption, because what it really is going to be is a knockdown of the study. And again, I want to give credit where credit's due. Cynthia McKinney. This is Cynthia McKinney's story. Where our whole research network is now feathering out and doing some additional research. But she's the one who put it in her book in April 2020.
Here's
now, my question.
Here's a PDF. It's a lot of it was redacted.
Okay, go ahead and read some of that, Andy.
I guess it's from Marcia McNutt to the Kelvin Drogemeyer. And this one again, I thought it had gone to you, but maybe not directly. I'll try to get an update. Jeremy Farrar to Victor Dezau. Victor, Eddie Holmes and a small group have been looking extensively at the origins of evolution. I don't know if you've ever dug into Eddie Holmes. He had a major role in the controlling.
I know who he is, and Australian CSIRO. We can get into Eddie in a minute.
But this is the latest summary written as part of the series of TC discussions we set up, and included Tony and Francis as well, as a small group from USA, UK, Europe, and Australia. Best wishes from Jeremy, and the rest is redacted. So they just only allowed a couple of the pages between the showcasing who was kind of emailing each other back and forth. But I did have on, like, we talk about Michael Callahan and his role with Russia, bringing the scientists over from Russia, kind of like the Operation Paperclip. It seems like Marcia McNutt was in charge of that in Ukraine as well. We saw those Russian scientists, a lot of them just posted up in Ukraine and continued their biological research. So Marcia McNutt seems to be the person that went in and kind of like, hey, we got to keep these guys undercover and their research undercover, and move them around now that this war is breaking out. So here's just a little paragraph. Shortly after Russia invaded Ukraine this past February, the U.S. NAS and the Polish Academy of Sciences entered into an agreement to help Ukrainian researchers, those still in Ukraine, and hundreds of others who have been forced to flee to Poland and neighboring countries, continue their work during the war. The U.S. NAS and PAN are also serving as secretariats for a high-level international coordinating group of scientific organizations formed to take concrete steps to support Ukraine's research community with the aim of rebuilding a successful global science and innovation system in Ukraine when the war ends. And she says she's humbled to receive the honor, and I continue to be deeply inspired and impressed by the bravery of the Ukrainian people in the face of this war and its unrelenting hardship, said NAS President Marcia McNutt. So she's in charge of kind of dispersing where that research goes and what happens to it.
Yeah, and in the Soviet system, the way it worked was, they basically had the men. There was a lot of women snipers. That was the one thing that was kind of like a little bit of a standoff weapon. But a lot of the women in the Russian military were put into the medical corps, sort of like our Karmadoc, right? And they were working at these bio labs, so it was a very high percentage of women. They were also the women doctors doing the autopsies, the critical skills of doing the autopsies. So those are the type of women that you want to be bringing in if you are going to be dispersing bioagents on these shock troops, right? And a lot of the troops are from, you think they're from Russia, but they're actually from these satellite states of Russia. A lot of them are actually Muslim troops, believe it or not, coming from Georgia and so forth. And then you want those same women that were wielding the knife at Stepnogorsk and Sverdlovsk and Novosibirsk, you want those same people wielding a knife in Dnipropetrovsk in Ukraine. And sometimes you bring the really good ones, you bring to work down here in Alachua, or down south in Alachua. I'm in Atlanta, but down in Alachua, Florida, where we had them going to work with the gal who's got the Nobel Prize in directed evolution, Frances Arnold. So go ahead, Andy. What do you have here?
I'm just putting up little graphics of what you're this is from their website, the National Academies of Sciences, and what you're talking about, bringing the scientists into Ukraine, moving around Europe a little bit. That's what she's in charge of. And yeah, I was with you down in Florida a couple of times when we heard some people we're just sitting there on the bench. They come over, they're just speaking in like the Ukrainian language, and they're sitting there yelling at each other and stuff. It's like I wish I could listen into that conversation going on.
Sort of like being at January 6th. You wonder, where am I? Am I in Kiev? Am I in the Maidan? You know, there's a lot of similarities, and even the troops that trained at Maidan for the original penetration and getting into the government buildings and so forth, we think maybe the same group that was employed at the Capitol. We don't know yet. We need more information. But again, look at my video that's filmed live at the three gates. The three gates are now the key to the whole story of January 6th. That's the key. The gates are the key that unlock the whole story of January 6th. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time through some great intelligence given to me by Ann Vandersteel. To show those three gates, right, are the three that the Ukrainians had to go through to get in there to steal those laptops. But anyway, this is where I'm saying, Andy, intelligence, 90% of the work in any type of battle, if you will, is done with the eye, right, and the ear, right? You want as little to be done with the hand and foot as possible in any intelligence operation. You want as much to be done with the eye and the ear. So this is why we do what we do here. This is why we're doing the intelligence collection and the intelligence analysis of what the heck is going on in Ukraine. Why are these billions coming in? Why are they covering it up? And the thing that also clued me in on this, you may remember there was a similar rush at the Capitol for the approval hearings of Brett Kavanaugh. And there was one, Julie Swetnick, that came out as supposedly one of the sexual accusers of Brett Kavanaugh. Well, right across from where the servers were, where we said they were in 2017, was the Library of Congress, where Julie worked, right? And up in Bethesda, Maryland, she worked at NIH. Again, these are key places where Fauci worked, and there was key leaks from the National Academy of Sciences and all the information that was going to the Library of Congress, right? So we get books like this, right? But we don't get books about how people are being brought into the Library of Congress. We had Imran Awad at the Library of Congress with terabytes going to Pakistan, all to where? War-torn countries. The same pattern we saw with Imran Awad from 1999 with Osama bin Laden all the way through the end of the Iraq War is the same pattern we're seeing in Ukraine. All this money going in and the science happening right alongside of the war. Now that normally never happens. And that seems to be the markings of this new warfare, this new low-intensity biowarfare.
And this is one of the things we were going to get into. And this is, you said mainstream media wasn't covering this stuff in Ukraine and wasn't covering this stuff on COVID like we were doing, and we were getting shut down at the same time. It seems to be starting to catch up to them a little bit. We see in the news that LA Times is laying off journalists. We have Business Insider. There's a bunch of Washington Post was losing $100 million last year. ESPN, Layoffs, Sports Illustrated, anyone who kind of wasn't doing their journalistic due diligence is kind of paying the price right now. And I see people like in the chat saying that, like, oh, why are you talking about COVID still? It's boring. And it's like, because no one in the main, everyone just kind of ignores it. And disease X is coming on the forefront. It's on our doorstep, and it's gonna happen during this next election, and definitely
Disease X.
going on. Yeah.
Yeah, and what we're saying is, if you don't link COVID to military operations, you think you'll always be the sort of the pig in the slaughter pen, or you'll be the chicken in the slaughter house in the chicken coop waiting to be slaughtered, right? Or you'll be the sheep, right? But if you look and see what the farmer's actually doing, right, with the military forces to affect these things in a series of military operations, of live exercises, then you start going, wait a minute, in order to stop this, 50 of our friends keep going off to the slaughterhouse here. We got to stop going to the slaughterhouse. This is not a good pattern here. So that's why we're talking about COVID, not because of COVID, because of the military operations behind COVID. Andy, this book here, Vaccine A, and this book, Vaccine A, was all about Bruce Ivins and blaming Bruce Ivins for his vaccine and his new recombinant vaccine, right? Which is how basically biotech companies were born, taking that technology, another Hoffman Roche company, which is bought by Genentech, right? And basically trying to harness its ability to do gene therapy. This bacteria has this ability to go from point A to point B and deliver genetics, right? And they're trying to, mRNA can be considered almost an attempt to recreate what nature has already does quite well, right, with anthrax. And we see that they're still stockpiling anthrax vaccine, leading us to believe that whatever's coming next with disease X will have an anthrax backbone. They haven't solved this yet. And that's why it's important that we talk about these things. So what do you have here, Andy? I can't quite see it.
This is from the Defense Visual Information Service. This is the military working on anthrax and engineering viruses to kind of be more helpful than they are deadly. But the release of the helpful viruses, decontamination of Bacillus anthracis stern following bath spray treatment. At the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, New York, cadet researchers are working to demonstrate the natural bacteria killing ability of bacteriophages to create a potential new biothreat decontamination tool for joint force equipment. Phages are viruses that infect bacteria and use their host's internal cellular machinery to replicate, which then leads to the bacteria's death. Phage therapy has been used to successfully treat drug-resistant bacterial infections where traditional antibiotic therapy had failed. The Defense Threat Agency's Chemical BTO department, in its roles as a joint scientific office, sorry, it's just pretty much the military is involved. For this project, the phage's bacteria killing effect was assessed for its ability to treat contaminated surfaces. The cadets used a solution containing phage to destroy the anthrax-causing Bacillus anthracis applied to military relevant surfaces such as boot, uniform fabric, and stainless steel. But yeah,
Can I stop you?
Continuing their work now. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is Bruce Ivins. The Bruce Ivins is the one who developed the gamma bacteriophage to disable anthrax. This is why I say the military is betting everything on anthrax. You can have different spikes on anthrax to make it look like disease X, whatever you want. I can make it look like Ebola or Congo, Crimea, hemorrhagic fever. I can put any virus spike on the anthrax backbone. But I can render let's say I wanted to take out a whole bunch of people, let's say deplorables, right? I can release something that is and I would only do that if I was the government and I hated deplorables, and I'm not. So those two things have to be in place. But if I was the government and I hated deplorables, I could release something that was antibiotic resistant. And I could give my troops this bacteriophage especially if you release like an anthrax, they're going to die, right? I know they're going to die. And this is tried and true. This isn't something like, I hope it works someday. This has been working ever since Pasteur and Robert Koch first came up with Koch's postulates. This has been around for 150 years. This is around before World War I. I know you're going to die, right? So this isn't speculation. But what is an interesting twist here is they're taking the Ivan's technology for determining to help defend against an attack. And now they're turning that on its head, saying, let's bring in the Russians, the stuff Ken Alibek was working on, and Vector, and bring in the biopreparat stuff, the agents that were constructed so that they would be antibiotic resistant, right? And we have Ivans' bacteriophage technology. We have the shield already. Ivans did it. We're done here, right? And so you can see the Army is working on this, right? This is their strategy as a force multiplier in an insurrection type situation. So there's the proof. That's why we're talking about it. We're not talking about it because coronavirus was coronavirus. We're talking about disease X, which they have said already, Andy, is going to be 20 times worse than coronavirus. We're not talking about coronavirus. We're talking about coronavirus 20X. We're talking about coronavirus 20X right now. Not my estimation. Somehow they know, Andy. Somehow Tedros knows it's going to be 20 times worse. Now, how could they know it's 20 times worse than the coronavirus unless they know what it is? And they're just not telling us yet. And this is the thing, again, I hate to say it, but Karmaduck, while she's going out and looking at her chickens, and she's driving the farm vehicle there, looks at, I give her a circular diagram of the shot, of the Pfizer shot, and she immediately says, oh, there's 2 genes in there for to take out, one was, I think, amoxicillin, and one, I can't remember what the other one was there for. But it was testing in the Pfizer shot. It was in there to reduce the effects if someone had taken antibiotics like penicillin and so forth. And I can't remember exactly what the 2 things were in the thing, but she immediately looked at it. And then she got on her, motorbike and went out and fed the chickens. She immediately saw it as a military doctor. That's why I say, this is different. This isn't like going to Columbia or Harvard or Princeton and getting traditionally trained. The doctors who are in those traditional civilian sets don't think like that. The 101 in Kosovo does think about ethnic cleansing, does think about biological weapons, and that's how they think. That's how they're trained to think. That's why I say we have built our network, our new neighborhood news network, around somebody who thinks that way, because we're going to need somebody who thinks that way if and when Joe Biden decides to release the forces on the deplorables. So we have to be smarter. We have to be smarter rather than stronger in some cases. We have to know what's coming and hitting us, rather than waiting for it to happen and then, dying. So there you go.
Well, we have gene therapy and viruses being used for good at the same time. So this article just came out a couple days ago. A gene therapy breakthrough enables deaf boy to hear for the first time. And a little part of this article kind of brought some things to my attention. But on October 4, 2023, Dam underwent a groundbreaking surgical procedure at a renowned children's hospital of Philadelphia. The operation involved partially lifting his eardrum and introducing a modified virus specifically engineered to transport functional copies of the otoferlin gene into the fluid of his cochlea. This innovation approach kickstarted the production of missing protein in his hair cells, ultimately restoring their proper function. So he had a modified virus injected into his ear, which made it so he could miraculously hear again. We're seeing these viruses being used for a lot of different types of gene therapy, and that's what you're worried about with the military applications. They're using it for negative ways.
Was it an adenovirus vector? It'd be interesting to see if you search that article for what the viral vector was. But basically, it was covered in the movie Airplane. What's your vector, Victor? Remember in Airplane where they say, "What's your vector, Victor?" You're too young to remember that movie. But what technology vectors the gene that you want to put in it, and you can see what they're doing with the gene therapy. Again, not a doctor. Carmodocchi is, I'm not. So I'm not speaking as a doctor. But what gene therapy has lately done is gone to protected compartments in the human body, right? Where there's tissue and dura layers and so forth and filter layers, like the eye, for instance, where there isn't a circulation of antibodies, right? They're kept away, or the spine, where there's a dura layer and a filter layers that you can do experimenting in the spine. Polio is the most classic example. And you could do gene therapy there for that reason. The layer there you're talking about, which is you've all seen the anvil and the stirrup and the horse, the three little bones of the ear, you don't want to mess those up. Well, the timpani, if you will, the timpani drum, for when you're doing your invasion with a Napoleonic invasion, that's a drum, the eardrum, and the eardrum has these little kind of little fingerlings, or like grass almost. And the grass, the timpani drum amplifies that in the ear canal. And then they'll move. It's sort of like wind blowing in the grass. You've seen Leaves of Grass with what was the guy's name with Bill?
A non-pathogenic adeno-associated virus. That's
adenovirus. Yep, adenovirus. It's been basically its replication capabilities have been taken away, but adenovirus is like a bacteriophage, and that'll go in and it'll put its genetic code in there. So what they do is, anyway, with the Walt Whitman, right, wrote Leaves of Grass, right? The idea of wind blowing, that's the sound, and then these little alveoli, or these little blades of grass, move, and that's what creates the mechanical sensation of sound. My brother's deaf in one ear and half deaf in the other ear, from a birth, is traumatic birth, and so I know a little bit about it. I don't know as much as, again, but anyway,
sounds like me right now.
Yeah, it sounds like you. Right, and a lot of people may want to be.
Yeah, I may need this gene therapy soon.
A lot of people may want to be deaf right now when they hear me talk. But anyway, when the thing that makes that little wavy piece of grass, supple, and when that dies, and then it's like flat matted grass, right, and it doesn't regenerate, that's when your hearing goes, because you're missing the receiver that's missing these waves of sound going by, like waves of wind. So that gene, the is it autopharyngeal gene or whatever, that gene is going to put a gene in that allows the grass to grow. Okay, basically, and then bring hearing back. And the gene therapy experiments, I talked to the guy in Alabama Eye Clinic who did the first gene therapy for the Helen Keller Association, and he was for the eye, and they were successful there because there is a enclosed compartment, right? And now here they're moving on. I say the original gene therapies experiments were the polio experiments, because the spinal column, the neural tube, has no antibodies. And again, you can get stuff by the antibodies. Later on, you can worry about the lipid nanoparticle to get by the immune system. But initially, hey, just zerk it into their spinal column, create a mass formation psychosis where we're allowed to do spinal taps like there's no tomorrow. And that's basically what the polio is. And now polio is being used as a polio vector. That's why I asked that question. What do you got here, Andrew?
Yeah, this is a new vaccine concept, could lead to a new generation of vaccines against SARS-CoV-2. Researchers at the University of Basel have developed a new approach for a vaccine against COVID-19. This vaccine is based on a modified coronavirus that can enter body cells and trigger an effective immune response, but cannot multiply in the body. And it's pretty much the same thing. They're working on these modified viruses to cure coronavirus as well. And that was like the
Well,
concept from the start, kind of, right? That was Barrick and all this work. They were just tinkering with viruses, seeing what they can. Well, they were trying to make money in the back end with the vaccines, but yeah.
yeah, no, and Mark Kulak has talked a lot about this. All these things are gene therapy. All these mass formation psychosis are gene therapy. I couldn't agree more. We may disagree a little bit on the details, but I would definitely agree that all of these spikes, the reason why they're adding all these spikes to an anthrax type backbone, right? Anthrax is the vector, right? Always works, the bacteriophage. But the reason why they're adding the spikes is anthrax isn't aerosolized. But whatever results from this will be an aerosol. They want this to be an aerosol. This is what Erasmus Lab's working on so much. They want it to be, so NATO's little shop of horrors, they want it to be aerosolized so that you can just breathe it in. The reason why that is important is you may want to use it on your enemy someday. And you can't go, hey, enemy, line up for your shot. It's not going to work, yelling over the river. You got to have an aerosol. So that's why you're always going to, anytime you see aerosolization, aerosolized vaccines, think aerosolized bioagents as well. Focus in on people working on aerosolization. It's always, always, always going to lead to the bioweaponeering. Look at the aerosolizing 8-ball at Fort Detrick with Sina Bavari, if you have any questions about that.
And I also have this article here. The U.S. military is hacking insects with virus DNA, raising fears of dangerous new bioweapons. And this is how they say the technology worked. And this is a program run out of DARPA called Insect Allies. So this is how the technology would work. Say you're a farmer who just heard that next month there's going to be a plague of locusts that love munching the particular variety of maize you're growing in the field. You've already planted your maize, so there's no time to grab some locust-resistant seeds and plant a new crop. Instead, you buy a whole load of aphids that have been infected with a genetically modified virus programmed to insert a locust-resistant genes into maize plants. When those aphids start chomping on your maize plants, they'll transmit that genetically modified virus to the crop. Once inside, the virus release its gene-editing molecules, and if everything goes to plan, turn your normal maize plant into a locust-resistant maize plant. So they tried to use insects as vaccines with these modified viruses. It seems like something they've been working.
That couldn't go wrong ever. You could see this as even more transparent here, that these are thinly veiled bioweapons to attack crops of an enemy that have just been retooled and repurposed, right, for commercial exploitation. It's just quite obvious. Monsanto started with the Cal gene. That's where also HIV starts, right, with the genetic modification, with the super saver tomato. And Walt Dessenbet, the guy who supposedly is the Fort Detrick shooter, which means he's actually the Fort Detrick victim of shooters at Fort Detrick, Walt Dessenbet was saying this. Hey, you're making stuff. I'm trying to make a cereal grain to feed the people of Ethiopia so there won't be famines, so that you can move people for pipelines, right? And I'm trying to make something that survives with less water, right? You guys are trying to take out grains. You guys are trying to take you're taking my biofermenters, and you're now using these biofermenters to make these weapons. Because why? Why? Because you want to move people off lands where there's uranium. You want to move people off lands where there's oil or gas or water or diamonds or gold or uranium, etc. And so he ends up being a target at Fort Detrick. This looks scary, Andy. What do you got here?
This is the Insect Allies program. It's a little cartoon plain explaining what you're talking about pretty
Does
much.
this have sound?
Plant viruses, but none are known that can edit a plant's chromosomes. However, man-made viruses can be created to edit chromosomes across species. A new program called Insect Allies aims to use this kind of gene-editing technology to help farmers and communities protect their crops. Until now, this technology has only been used indoors, but the military agency funding this program is interested in releasing it outside. While their idea is not new, it has never been done before. Farmers spend a lot of time worrying about how to protect the health of their crops from hazards. With insect allies, armies of insects would be infected with man-made viruses that are designed to directly target their crops. These viruses would be used to strengthen the plants against a wide selection of hazards. As a result, the main focus of this project is on viral dispersal. The insect allies themselves would only serve as viral vectors. For this plan to succeed, scientists would need to be prepared for anything. When the alarm sounds, they would need to quickly infect insects with the correct virus, transport them to farmers, and release them. The insects would then be able to distribute their infections to crops. To be useful in any capacity, all of this would require global infrastructure. It would need warehouses designed to house insects year-round and staff to breed and maintain them. These insects would also require safeguards that would prevent them living and breeding beyond their one-time use.
I wonder if they were doing this in Ukraine. Remember last episode, they said Ukraine had the most valuable farmland in the world, and that's what they were kind of fighting over. I wonder if they were kind of doing this projects over there.
The sunflowers, Andy, Kolomoisky is big in sunflowers in Ukraine, and he even to such an extent that in his safe in Tel Aviv and also in a safe in Kiev at his apartment, his most special guests, he gives a little bit of his super valued sunflower oil to for them to use when he has people over to dine. So this, and do you notice how the waves of grain here going back and forth, like for the ear analogy? So it's a good graphics, Andy, for both discussions. But this, what kind of farmer would do this? What kind of farmer would unleash a bioweapon in their field? And again, I'm not trying to promote the South Carolina primary event that we're having in Michigan on the 24th in Albion, Michigan. I'm not trying to over promote it. But if you want to talk to somebody who's actually got a farm and that actually understands biowarfare from a military point of view, you might want to spend a little bit of time who's somebody who's been in country in battle that's done that. A lot of people, by the way, have said that I made up Carmidel, that because I don't have the medical credentials, I made her up. And I've created this phantasm so that I can talk on these subjects as a stand-in. And that's not true, Andy. You've been there. You've met her. I've met her.
I helped build her deck.
Right. And I think you're the person who misplaced that post on the corner, but I'm blaming you. But she thinks it's
Inspector General missed it. That's all. Missed the spot. That's all I
but I'm just saying is she's not fake. She is America's real frontline doctor. And we are having she has rented this facility, this theater out in Albion on the 24th, 2:30 to 5:30. And you can come meet her and you can talk about this kind of stuff. You can talk about genetically engineered stuff like insect allies and NATO and so forth. And you could talk about vaccine strategy. She was a part of the vaccine strategy. She had to be as a captain in the Army. And you could talk about farming. And you can talk about avian flu. She raises chickens and she raises turkeys. You could also talk about these other strategies that are to defeat, because this may happen to you in the not so distant future. Gretchen Whitmer always is making sounds like we need to exterminate or use insecticide on these deplorables, right? So at some point you got to think, I'm not as worried about the crops and deploying DARPA crops technology. I'm worried about me and my family, right? For the next disease X that's going to be 20 times worse. So if you care about your family, you might want to bring them and yourself. This theater is beautiful theater, Andy. 400. I know you've probably never been there in Albion, but it's this beautiful new theater that they've renovated, this Bohm Theater. And oh, by the way, Andy, I wrote a Substack about it just this morning at 1 o'clock. How about that?
You did write a Substack on it, and I still haven't subscribed.
Hey, can you do me a favor? It's not It's not behind a paywall, but I skipped over your graphic there, Andy, and I apologize. Can we go back to your graphic that you had up with the green and red graphic?
I forget which one that was.
It was the last one you had up, and I apologize. I did a bad thing and talked over your graphic, but I did want to promote. We've had a lot of people say she's, you've cooked her up as this, the last doctor in America that knows this military technology, and I'm not. She was a part of Frontline Doctors. She found out it was corrupt. There's people siphoning all the money off from all the rapacious profits they got from HCQ and they got from IBM, and they put it into $2 million beach houses. Here we go.
Oh, this is just a step towards biological warfare with insects. A project by a research agency of the U.S. Department of Defense could easily be misused for developing biological weapons. And they just dig in more into this insect ally program, saying that, yeah, maybe this thing could be used on people.
Is it DARPA? Is DARPA the agency? Can you search it for DARPA?
Oh, yeah, this is 100% a DARPA. This is, I have it on their own website that DARPA.
And it's a lie. It's a lie that's saying this. It's a lie saying this is the first time that this has ever been released outside. Every war since World War II, these have been tested. Cynthia McKinney alluded to this. Project was called Big Itch. Operation Mongoose that John's father was involved in trying to shut down with Lansdale was also Operation Mongoose had a lot of biological components. I believe that the original Operation Mongoose, the presidential sign-off, is still being used today because you don't have to tell the next president. You just wait for this president to leave. Well, it's pretty easy to create an exit for a president, right? When you have a sniper team. And when they leave, you don't have to tell them about the program you approved, which is Operation Mongoose, which was bioagents. So here we go. What does this say, Andy? I can't quite read it.
It's just more, this is the insect allies, just it's DARPA. It's pretty much their program. I was trying to figure out if Michael Callahan was involved in this project, because this seems to be more of like his super soldier type and like programs that he was.
This would be more no, it's not a Malone type. The plant guy. Callahan works for higher order mammals. Like he was studying the condor that somehow can fly, 72 hours in a row, and somehow with very low. Is that my favorite dog? Is that Zeke the Wonder Dog?
Zeke, hey, no.
Zeke, he hears my voice. He misses me, Andy. He misses me. I think that's the problem here. He hears my voice, and I think he misses me. It's probably.
I'm trying to mute myself while he's barking.
Okay. All right. Well, Zeke the Wonder Dog. I love him to death. So anyway, we were talking about. I think he threw me off a little bit there because I started thinking about Zeke at the studios in Michigan, and I got a little bit thrown off. But yeah, Zeke is an animal, right? Callahan works with animals. Malone made mostly plants. There was this group called Commonwealth Bio that did a lot. All the genetic information as they were doing the Human Genome Project was being shuffled off to Commonwealth Bio in the middle, down in Richmond, Virginia, where all the tobacco planters are, and all the headquarters are like Philip Morris and so forth. And they said, hey, you guys, cigarettes are going away. You guys need to get into bio. So they were going to make all the vaccine with the tobacco plant. The tobacco plant turns out to be a very easy and interesting plant to do genetic manipulation on. And they were able to do genetic manipulation and gene therapy on tobacco plants with hybridization and so forth, way before they were able to do that with mammals. It's a different skill and difficulty level. So yeah, Bob Malone, I don't want to say Bob Malone is low skill level, but he is. And then Callahan is up here where higher order mammals is a lot harder. But that's the evolutionary ladder that you walk up when you're doing bioweapons. And then the final target is the humans. What do you got here, Andrew?
little article verifying your work. They're getting into DARPA and some of their other programs, but Callahan wanted to this Michael Callahan wanted to insert genetic code into specifically grown tobacco plants. The code would cause the plants to generate viral proteins, and these could then be made into active component of a vaccine. Tobacco is a fast-growing and easy to manipulate genetically. In theory, once we have inserted the genetic code of the virus, the plants can quickly make pure and safe proteins in huge quantities. No one had yet made a vaccine for the public this way, nor there had been human clinical trials to determine if the vaccine could induce immunity in large numbers of people. But the Obama administration was looking at all possibilities. The White House contacted Callahan on April 28th, according to his records. Officials requested a timeline with worst-case median and optimistic projections for using the tobacco plant method to manufacture hundreds of millions of doses of vaccine. Just then, Callahan was planning a live fire exercise. Does that sound like COVID-19? An experiment in which he would use tobacco plants to try to make the active components of the avian flu vaccine. He quickly substituted swine flu. The experiment was to be carried out by the Center for Molecular Biotechnology in Newark, Delaware, a nonprofit branch of Fraunhofer USA, a subsidiary of the large German Applied Research and Technology Organization. Callahan sent a fragment of the swine flu genetic code by email to the executive director of the center. The center, using the tobacco plants, produced a purified protein in 21 days. This wasn't a finished vaccine, but it's suggested by the process of making one could be rapidly accelerated. And this is where you get into him making the accelerated vaccines. And then you have the coronavirus hit the scene a couple years later. Oop, you're muted, George Webb.
Yeah, I was reaching for World War DARPA because I remember writing about Fraunhofer. I think they were in Maryland. It's just so it wouldn't look so bad of all the genetic research from the Human Genome Project going out to Commonwealth Bio. And then Bob Malone became involved in the new instantiation of Commonwealth Bio, which is called Virginia Bio. Virginia Bio, again, is this prospect going out to big tobacco and saying, hey, you know, Surgeon General warning and stuff, and tobacco causing all these cancers. Get out of that business and get into making bioweapons for us. You're here in Virginia. All you have to do is drive up to Washington every once in a while. We'll brief you. We'll put Commonwealth Bio in there. We'll make a genetic center. We'll have the University of Virginia, have a genetics and genomics center there. And this is going to be good for you if you support us and give us tremendous amounts of cash when we want to put DNC politicians in. And then the key guy here was the one who went after my right to free speech, Senator Warner from Virginia. With Donnie O'Sullivan, right? He said you shouldn't have to use a U.S. senator to deny somebody's free speech or something along that line. It shouldn't take a U.S. senator to get somebody like this kicked off of YouTube is basically what he said. But here is the other place that does a lot of genetic engineering, which is Bob Malone's Murray Gardner, right? Bob Malone's Murray Gardner, which we talked about in Immunity Bio, Michael Callahan's company, right? And this is, as I said, this is the first step in doing genetic manipulation is plants, and the simpler plants like yeast and so forth, E. coli, bacteria, and then you work your way up. You work your way up from E. coli to yeast to, to the tomato, right? And then tobacco is very easy to manipulate. It's the first virus as well that's isolated. So, and then Rockefeller Institute isolates the influenza virus, and then they're off to the races. Hey, this is a whole new world here of World War DARPA. Really, with the Rockefeller, with Stohr, when Stohr isolates, or Schope, S-C-H-O-P-E, when for the Rockefeller Institute, when he first isolates that as the cause of the great influenza, they didn't really understand that yet. They thought it was the Haemophilus influenzae. They didn't understand, but as soon as they could get into the lungs and figured out the causal factor of what made this flu so much more infective, right? And it was this H1N1 spike. That's the same spike that they put into the H5N1 that Erasmus Lab puts into the H5N1. You still have that on your computer, Andy.
I still have World War DARPA on my computer. I could print it up right now.
There I'm actually Washington's cherry tree, right, in Virginia on his tobacco plantation. And we actually discovered that that wasn't Washington's. Washington may not have cut down the original cherry tree, and that cherry tree may have grown right there on that. I'm on Washington's plantation right there. And that's when we're talking about, and we went, I went with Wendy and we went to all these different tobacco plantations going all the way back to Robert E. Lee's family. There's Fraunhofer. All the stuff we wrote about 3 years ago, Andy.
Where's Fraunhofer?
There's
right here.
Yeah. Yeah. Fraunhofer, and cultivating these vaccines. And it's by looking at all of the steps along the way and seeing it as a progression. You can almost predict what the next things that are going to be coming out from DARPA. And of course, it's going to be disease X. I always love this, Andy. If you go back to the one and zoom in on the little flag I'm holding in the disease of death, keep zooming in on the thing. I don't know if everybody remembers, but it said fake news on it. All the little flags said fake news. Keep zooming in on that little.
That's as far as it'll let me zoom in.
What is it? Can you read it? It said something about fake news.
It's
each of the little
one in your hand. All I can read is everywhere every day, and it says like Kraus or something like that.
Yeah, well, read the name on there, and I just went into the field and I picked up. This is supposedly 1 million deaths right by the Washington Monument, right, for coronavirus. And I went and I picked up one, and the first one I picked up had this, like John fake news, so like every other one of the flags, or maybe every 2 of the flags, or every 3 of the flags, was this fake news guy. And then there was interspersed in that maybe influenza deaths or whatever, but they made this idea that there's 1 million dead here in order to create mass formation psychosis.
Yeah, along with all the nurses dancing and YouTube videos and masks being everywhere. It was all mass formation psychosis was definitely being implemented. But is there a way the audience can find this book now, Mr. George Webb? Is it still available on the internet at all?
It's on my Substack, georgewebb.substack.com. You can get it's plan a good weekend to get through it all. I mean, it's a thick book. It's 350 some pages. But every page is like breaking news. That's verified later. Act Blue. We were saying, how did Hillary get all the people giving money to Bernie? Like I gave to Bernie for 3 times. How did they get all the people giving money to Act Blue? How did they give them and then shift their money over to Debbie Wasserman Schultz? And I showed emphatically with an email that I received from Act Blue how they added an S. And then if you were just a regular Bernie person and you said, oh, I need more money, and you said, yes, I'll send more money because they had your thing, you would be sending it to Hillary. So this is the Imran Awan gypsy switch that they did. And then of course, Imran Awan's computer, she dialed into it and somebody got into her iPad and switched all the money over in one day from Bernie to Hillary. But every page, and later that comes up. James O'Keefe just last year came out and confirmed this story. 6 years later, James O'Keefe, when he was trying to find another story to do after Jordan Walker and the perfect Pfizer org chart, he confirms this story. This is Media Matters. This is David Brock, right? And James Alefantis, that whole psychological operation to cover who? Tim Alefantis making the universal vaccine, which is the shield in a sword and shield weapon system. So every page is still valid, Andy. Every page is still valid. There's Michael.
That's why the sword and shield theory works when you talk about the Wuhan military games being the super spreader event. And you want all the U.S. military soldiers to have the vaccine ahead of time. You do super sprayer event, you release some insects.
And Andy, if it isn't, let's say it isn't contagious. Let's say, just for instance, Mark Kulak's right. It's like, it's not a contagious agent. Okay. Doesn't matter. That's the perfect place where you would train people to spray stuff into a cold air return in a hospital. And you would all take an order simultaneously and you would all spray it. That's where you do a training of something like that. If you wanted to create a mass formation psychosis, if you wanted to train everybody in Boston one last time at the end of February, when you were out ready to launch this thing and you're going to shut down the country, you would want to train them one last time last weekend of February, wouldn't you? Right. Mm-hmm. We're actually having our get together in Albion, Michigan at that Bohm Theater on the anniversary of Bob Malone's super spreader mass formation psychosis that he created in 2020. So this can be done with military training. That's the key point I want to keep making, is that even if it wasn't an effective agent, even if it was just anthrax and they hadn't aerosolized it, they still could have used it as an organizing event. Remember, event 201, Andy, happens at the same exact time. Look at it. Isn't that beautiful, Andy?
Mm-hmm. It is a beautiful, one of those beautiful old theaters in Michigan. We are, do you know the exact dates yet?
Yes, I do. It's the date of the South Carolina primary. Look at the inside, Andy, how they've retooled this thing. You can have cocktails up there in the balcony. It's 400 seats, 300 down below, 96 above. It's an experience of a lifetime, right? This is the thing that you'll remember. If you bring your kids, they'll remember it forever. They'll say, Dad, remember when you took me to that beautiful old theater? And, you know, we heard the lady Army doctor talk about how I could become a doctor if I got into the Army. Mm-hmm. And now I'm a doctor, and now I'm paying for your bills in convalescent care. And now I'm living longer than all the other friends I have. That's because I took my kid, right, to the Bohm Hotel on the 24th in 2024 in Albion, Michigan. And now I'm living to 90, maybe even 100. My kids are all doctors. The Army paid for it all. And now we're just sitting back and collecting the cash. That's all it takes. All we're asking for is some people sponsor some of the citizen journalists that come from various locations to help with their flights to get here. And then the rest, we're going to plan on having speakers. You were the key person, Andy, that worked with the veterans for people doing equine therapy. We'd like to reach out to people in the area that do equine therapy to keep veterans at risk out of trouble. We have another group that we work with that tries to keep veterans in their homes. One of the key triggers for veterans committing suicide is losing their home. So we'd like them to speak. So it's going to be a nice day for veterans. It's going to be a great day for farmers. It's going to be a great day for people who believe in the Constitution, because you have to be smarter. You have to be smarter and know what's coming. They're not going to be driving down your front drive with an MRAP. They're going to be hitting you with things like insect allies to destroy your farm, to try to get you to commit suicide. That's the big message that I want to leave today. And knowing and have knowledge of the enemy is intelligence gathering. 95, I saw someone who just joined my Substack talking about Napoleon Bonaparte and how did Napoleon Bonaparte win everything until Waterloo? And it's intelligence gathering, using his cavalry as his eyes and ears, that made him better. Plus, he was very mobile and he could react to that information. That's how we have to be. We can't be a fixed set piece in thinking, oh, well, we're going to have this bomb shelter right here and this will take care of me. No, it won't, because you have to breathe, right? And so we have to think next generation warfare in order to survive.
Mm-hmm. And Aaron actually sent me a little some little fun facts about the bomb theater, and there's a heavy influence of the Purple Gang in that area. And so here's a little article that Aaron sent me before the show. The Purple Gang. It is well known that two members of the infamous Purple Gang, Sam Bernstein and Louis Fleischer, lived in Albion during the Prohibition and after. The West Michigan gangs were all able to brew their own tub beer and gin, but were unable to make labeled liquor. The Detroit-based Purple Gang had a corner in this market by smuggling tagged alcohol across the Detroit River and distributing it for a price. Western gangs had a choice. They could go to war with the Purple Gang to take over the business or do business with the Purples. In truth, none of them wanted to do anything with the war. The violence were so bad. So why did Sam Bernstein and Louis Fleischer live in Albion? Their main objective was to meet with gangsters from Chicago, St. Louis, and all points west to negotiate the delivery of contraband tagged liquor from Canada via Detroit. Albion's location between Chicago and Detroit made it to a logical meeting place. While in Albion, they ran a junkyard called Riverside Metal, which they used as a front for their real business, theft. They had an armored car that they used and kept hidden in Albion. They wouldn't try to break the safe in a robbery. Instead, they would take the entire safe to their metal yard where they would open it on fire and then melt it down into slag metal. Poof, more security. Ellen Sharp, the longtime box office of the Bomb Theater, was alive when Mary and I moved to Albion in 2014. I don't know why he forgot to send me the rest, but they used to visit the Bomb Theater a lot and, and go watch shows. And yeah, Al Capone in Chicago had a house on a lake up in Michigan. All these gangsters had little houses on lakes, on the many lakes in Michigan. So there is some history at the Bomb Theater as well.
Well, over in Luna Pier, I stayed at Pretty Boy Floyd's house there, where the hooch used to come in, and this became why it's so important to understand the prohibition with the Bronfmans and so forth, and the English connection to the Bronfmans, because all the Crown Royal and all that got 10%. They kick back as a royalty to the British Crown. So the British Crown was very involved in looking the other way for all this activity in Canada by the Bronfmans. And those rat lines became the rat lines of Meyer Lansky and for drugs after World War II, especially with the various plans to just basically upgrade from prohibition and alcohol to drugs. And so it's very important, because the whole formation of mob life in America is transporting hooch. That became the Teamsters, right? And then the Teamsters were all consolidated, as you said, in Chicago in 1973 by Alan Dorfman, who was a member of the Purple Gang. And he moved from Detroit to Chicago to do that roll up by Al Capone and the outfit. So it's very important, because these are the same people that, how many females do you know that killed somebody? I mean, that's who comes and visits me at the at the National Press Club. So there you go. Go ahead and read this article, Andy.
When the Purple Gang ruled Detroit, the story of Detroit's notorious mob. In the 1910s and 20s, organized crime ruled by many large cities in the U.S., including Detroit. 3 years before the national prohibition, Michigan adopted the Damon Act, prohibiting the sale of liquor, which took effect in 1917. Organized crime takes over Detroit. The Purple Gang was Detroit's most notorious mob. It operated in the 20s and 30s, led by members of the Bernstein family. The gang was who we just mentioned, that would go to Albion in the bomb. The gang was made up of mostly Jewish members. The Canadian border provided a gateway to illegal distribution of alcohol products from Detroit to larger cities like Chicago and New York. The Purple Gang, also known as the Sugar House Gang, has been labeled the bloodiest gang of its area, with estimates reaching more than 500 rivals killed during bootleg wars. The Purple Gang controlled Detroit's underworld, including gambling, especially on horse races and other sporting events. And you want me to keep reading into this? Is Cole
Well, I was
Moisty
just going to say the Sugar Hill Gang. The Sugar Hill Gang was a better name for them, because so many of the liquors required the Caribbean sugar for the distillation process, and so that's why they're called Sugar Hill. The Purple Gang kind of came in later as almost same reason you have Burisma as an energy company in front of bio agent experimentations in Ukraine. Burisma means shadow. It means a cloaking, right? And the purple gang is the same sort of thing, a purple curtain. You put a purple curtain over this, the real mafia activity. And Jimmy Hoffa, if you remember, is murdered. And the guy who he's murdered across the street from Max Fisher's restaurant. We went to the restaurant. I went with Dave in Detroit to, I think it's Bloomfield Hills, where he was murdered. And then across the street is the Max Fisher Institute. You know, it's kind of like, we're taking over here. And Jimmy, your usefulness as a Teamster is no longer needed. We don't need you anymore. We've rolled up all of the regional mafias that are based. Cleveland was one. Jackie Presser was close to our family. Gave us a little tiny bit of money. $200 is what my dad got for doing the electronics for the cordless phone. His partner got $10,000 from the Cleveland Mafia. So we saw $200 of that. We saw $0 from the invention of the cordless phone, but it was sold through the Golden Bear Communications in the Cleveland Mafia, and Jackie Presser. It was sold. Somebody just recently attacked me for this because he said, I'm a billionaire because my dad invented the cordless phone. No, that the Cleveland Mafia came to our house and intimidated my father and said, you have beautiful children. I don't know. These monsters probably didn't have that great eyesight because they were referring to me and my brother David. They said, you have beautiful children. It'd be terrible if something happened to them. So my mother made my father sign away the rights to Jack Schaefer for the cordless phone. Golden Bear Communications, the Cleveland mob, sold it to the Chicago mob, the outfit, through Motorola, which they controlled. Motorola patents, for all the communications patents, they came out with the first big brick phone. Mm-hmm. Martin Cooper, about 15 years later, using the antenna. One of the antennas was on the John Hancock building, the other was on the Sears Tower. And that's what my dad didn't have, antenna height. And that's why the range was limited. But when you added the Sears and the tower in the John Hancock building, you pretty much anywhere in Chicago 10 years later. The Martin Cooper phone, by the way, the Motorola Martin Cooper phone is my dad's phone with more batteries and a plastic injection case. Just saying, just be real honest here. But all those patents went into Motorola, and then Google with Alphabet bought those patents in Schaumburg. And I went and covered it. I showed the old Schaumburg plant with Motorola, and I showed how Google now owned it across the street. So it's an interesting story because the mafia, my point here is the mafia doesn't just say, oh, well, we're done with hooch. We better quit now. No, they say, let's get into something even better. Let's get into drugs. Once you do that, the Sackler family and with Purdue Pharmaceuticals and so forth, they got into opiates. Hey, opiates are running good, but let's get into fentanyl. Hey, fentanyl's running good, but let's get into carfentanil, which is even more deadly. And if the kids overdose, hey, that's organ day at the hospital. So this is what I'm saying is there's a climbing of the ladder here of value added in crime. And a lot of these same interests are getting into these bioagents. That's the big idea here. And you're muted, Andy. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I had a little cough there. So I was doing a little research and seeing if the if there was a connection to the Purple Gang and what's going on in Ukraine right now. And I just pulled up the composer Leonard Bernstein. His dad was Sam Bernstein. I don't know if that's the Russian dad, but they're from Russia / old Ukraine as well. And I was just wondering if the Purple Gang has a lot of influence going on in Ukraine right now, because that seems to be like their old territory in the homeland.
Well, a lot of people say yes. Aaron Adler, I mean, he would remind us about Chabad Lubavitch about 17 or 18 times in a sitting in one evening where we'd have pizza and beer. Aaron would tell us the story of the sixth Rebbe being kidnapped in Ukraine and being brought to New York to run the Mossad in New York and so forth. So there's a strong connection with Chabad Lubavitch. And Aaron's right. There was a huge connection. There was a Jewish connection to all these Italian mobs. I know the most about Cleveland because I was, born in the middle of it. But up on the hill is where the Jewish mob was, up on the way out to Mount Sinai Hospital. The Mayfield Road gang was out there, which was the kind of the intermediaries to the port, which was the Italian mafia. And then down in the port was Danny Green with all those dock workers. And here's Dave. Here's the guy who's the expert on the Detroit, the Purple Gang mob here. Go ahead.
No, we should actually just have him chirp in right now and give us Purple Gang, the history of the Purple Gang. But Leonard Bernstein wrote the part of West Side Story at Cranbrook. I just saw Jamie Bernstein speak there 2 weeks ago. And I don't know. I know like Epstein had some school up in Michigan. He was
Interlochen.
Interlocking that he was. Is that associated with Purple Gang and all that as well?
No, what they wanted to do was they wanted to, the mafia got into all kinds, especially the German, the old Abwehr guys, intelligence officers, wanted to get into American entertainment in the worst way. Remember Colonel Tom Parker that was the handler for Elvis, had murdered a guy in Germany before he got to the United States. But Interlochen was going to be this place between, in northern Michigan, this place between Chicago and between Detroit, where they would collect all the best musical talent. It's sort of like a Sound of Music. You just have all these incredible musicians come from all over, and unfortunately,
a lot of rich kids from Michigan.
Interlochen tilted toward the very talented.
Yeah,
and you could just see where they're picking the next Taylor Swift. This is where you could get the next Taylor Swift, because you have somebody who's marketable and also talented, and now you go there. Jeff Epstein did the same thing with in Paris with all the modeling agencies with Guy, can't remember his name. Peter Duke ran into him in Europe in the fashion world. Dave is saying something here.
Crazy that Henry Booth brought both Lenny Bernstein and Charles Lindbergh to Cranbrook.
Henry Booth Luce, I think, is who he's talking about, and that's the person who does Time Magazine and then of course the Scripps Foundation, and that's in San Diego, and starts the San Diego papers that are owned by James Jameson now. People that were threatening us with the mafia folks down there, Gotti and so forth. And believe me, the organized crime is tight down there, right? The Booth started, I think it was the wife that started the Scripps Foundation, or may have been Booth himself. So there's a long, also getting into the newspaper and publications. So is it San Diego Times Mirror? I can't remember. San Diego Current. I can't remember the 2 papers or 3 papers he owned. But now, fast forward, the CIA apparatchik of John Brennan, Dr. Sun Shang, with Cancer Lindbergh Project, owns those newspapers, the San Diego, Times Tribune or whatever it is. So Dave's right here. The Purple Gang, saw the prohibition thing coming, and then bought into the politicians and bought into the judges. And this is done very well, by the way, with the series of The Godfather, where they talk about getting into legitimate businesses. Toward the end, they're almost totally out of the casino businesses, and those are going over to entertainment guys. And now they're into drugs, they're into these bioagents, they're into a lot of this stuff, especially the Jewish mafia. And Kolomoisky is the best in, is there a connection to now? Absolutely. Look at Kolomoisky. He's the one getting all the billions, and he's kicking back $1 billion here and $1 billion there, like it's pocket change to these Democratic politicians and the DNC. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, George Webb. I believe that's all I got on the docket for today, unless you want to comment on the Trump E. Jean Carroll trial. I know Trump, for the first time yesterday, like first time in U.S. history, a president took the stand. He didn't get to say much because the judge restricts his speech. But what's your thoughts on what's going on there?
Well, I'm going back to downtown. There's another trial here with Trump on election interference. There's another one in Washington, D.C. on insurrection. And again, I think these defamation trials, first of all, This woman looks older than the Queen in the Queen's last days, right? So, you know, they're making the case that somehow Trump sexually harassed her. I think that she's getting such big money on the defamation because there are a lot of people who don't like Trump making fun of this woman's looks. I mean, but that's not a crime, right? That's not a crime. And she got 5 million. And judging on, you know, Trump's meanness as far as the looks go, the $10 million fine may be in order. But these are not sexual harassment crimes. These are defamation crimes, right? But that's not a reason to put somebody who's the leading candidate in jail, right? That's not the reason to put somebody's leading candidate in jail. And you know, he says she's not my type. You know, she's just not my type. He wasn't even able to successfully identify her in a photograph. You think if they had all this, you know, crazy, you know, sexual relations and so forth, he'd at least be able to pick her out of a lineup. You know, here's the Queen, here's this person. Which one's which? And Trump's like, well, I think that's the Queen. Like he doesn't know who the other person is. So to me, this is a diversion. The reason why they delayed this till after South Carolina, after New Hampshire, was they were going to make it. Nikki Haley was going to be thumbing her finger in the eye of Trump and make him mad and make him say something angry toward women. Right. I mean, the Queen looked better than this woman, let's just say. Can we be honest at the end of the day?
He almost has my haircut.
But I mean, it's hard to imagine. It's just hard to imagine in any world. He's married to Melania. He's married to the supermodel. She still is the fashion plate on all the women's magazines. She's prettier than Jackie Kennedy ever thought of being. You know what I mean? It's just the whole construct here is just beyond any reasonable person, right? Why are they doing this? They want to take your eye off March 4th. March 4th is when he goes to the insurrection trial. And they want to take your eye off what's going on here in Atlanta, where the great Amber Connor. This is why, by the way, you mentioned earlier, all of the old investigative papers are firing all their investigative positions. We got 200 guys here sitting around that are supposedly investigative reporters, and Amber Connor just cleaned your clock. Amber Connor just cleaned your clock in federal court. Did you not know where the courthouse was? Could you not sit your ass in there for when the pen hack drama occurred? The ballpoint pen touching the thing for 5 seconds, showing how easy it is to throw elections, which completely blows a hole in the DNC theory that these are bulletproof machines. He doesn't fire a gun into the machine, the image cast thing. He takes a pen from the opposition. It's not a David Copperfield trick. He just puts the pen on it for 5 seconds and he breaks into the machine, completely blowing up, right, the prosecution's argument over the last 4 years. That's why they went to New York. And if you remember, we said Alina Habba was going to be the person who vectored something at Trump. 3 days later, Alina Habba says she's sick and her parents are sick with coronavirus, so that they could delay this trial and Trump taking the stand until after New Hampshire, because now they want to make it about Trump's misogynist, right? Plus, they want to make Trump a white supremacist by wrapping him in the Stars and Bars Confederate flag between now and South Carolina. And I say these are traps, Andy, right? These are traps, and the smart politician stays away from the traps. And we'll go to my Substack after this, because this is what my Substack is about. But here you go. Let's play this.
Here's Alex.
Building your online business?
Didn't know there was going to be a ad here, but this is Alex Haderman on the election vulnerabilities for the Georgia elections.
Pretty basic, really.
Washington Journal continues.
Alex Halderman joins us again from Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he teaches engineering and computer science at the University of Michigan. And one of your research specialties is computer and election security. So I wonder, Professor, what you thought of this headline last week from Salon. Hackers can easily break into voting machines used across the United States. Hackers at a recent Las Vegas conference penetrated voting machines within minutes, turning them into gaming consoles.
Well, unfortunately, it's all too true that
election infrastructure across the United States remains weakly protected and vulnerable against sophisticated foreign hackers. We've got a lot of work to do as a country before 2020 and elections to come. That headline's talking about the DEF CON conference last week in Las Vegas, and actually the students who turned those voting machines into voting consoles, into video game consoles, included some of our research students from here at Michigan. So voting machines, unfortunately, are a target ripe for the picking.
And you're somebody who has personally hacked a voting machine yourself. Why did you do that, and what did you learn?
Oh, yes. So in security research, I and other colleagues have brought many different kinds of voting machines and other election equipment into the laboratory to test them. We play the role of an attacker and see how easily the real bad guys could make them misbehave.
This was before 2020.
What we found with every single kind of voting machine that's been rigorously tested, unfortunately, is vulnerabilities where someone could hack in, put malicious software on the voting machine and cause it to be sabotaged or even silently steal votes.
Do you work with election officials at the state or federal level to show them what you've learned about how easy it is to hack these machines?
Yes. So I am currently co-chairing for the Michigan Secretary of State a commission to advise the state on how to become a national leader in election security. I also spend frequent trips to Washington trying to educate lawmakers. What we need is...
Question, George Webb. Do you think the people, the groups that hacked the elections were sitting there like, thank you for telling us how to hack our elections at these meetings and just using what he said? All you need is a USB and a
easier than that, Andy. He is the one who trains the people that did the election hacking. We just had two charrettes in Ann Arbor, steps away from where he trained people. Bogacheva and Krylova and all these Russian operatives that are being brought in are trained in exactly this technology, cyber hacking technology. When he says they play the role of the hacker, it's because they're rehearsing being attackers. This is where they're trained. This is why we did two charrettes in Ann Arbor. And look at me holding the pen, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
Am I withholding the information? Am I withholding how he did it? Am I holding this away from the American people? No, there it is. There it is. Look at it. Is this special? Did this come from outer space? Or is this a common, ordinary pen? And with this pen, in 5 seconds, I'll hack that machine. Now, remember when everyone in Congress said that this was conspiracy theory that you could knock down these machines? Well, our Amber Connor, no one else, Neighborhood News Network. Now they Gateway Pundit knew that it was a huge story, and so Gateway Pundit threw down some shekels fast to get the byline, and we lost the byline. And Lou Dobbs got the story with the shekels, but that's okay because Amber needs the shekels. She's raising 2 kids, so I'm so proud of Amber. But this is the biggest story in elections ever, because with electronic, you could send a team of Krylovas and Bogachevas, right? Paul Whelan's getting their visas. They're in the country because they're not U.S. citizens. It's not U.S. crime, right? He's outside of the Kremlin recruiting these people, right? They're bringing them in. Now it's a CIA operation. I don't need to inform the president. I don't need to inform anybody. I can have this as an epicenter training ground, right, in Ann Arbor. And Haldeman's the one who did the pen hack. Haldeman said you could do it remotely. You could do it in person. You could do it with malware. You could do it with a pen. You could just shut the machines down and then cause voting to be delayed and figure out how to put votes in somewhere else. This is ground zero where we were talking about with Paul Whelan, Krylova, and Bogacheva. Again, the people that Lou Dobbs ended up going to and Gateway Pundit goes to in a pinch, Neighborhood News Network and Amber Connor. And of course, Harry the Greek, who's been following me as well. He's been following election information. Chris, the IP Hunter, is a great Neighborhood News Network correspondent as well and contributor. All of these people have done such a great job. Addie Ads was down at the TCF Center. Dave was down at the TCF Center with him. So it's a community effort. But look who's coming up with these stories. Look who's coming up with these stories, Andy. It's us. because we're feet on the street. This is why they're firing so many people in these investigative journalist companies, because they're not doing anything. They're not producing the information for the American people. And I wanted to throw out one other thing. I wrote a Substack about why Trump shouldn't fall into these traps. And I think when he goes to South Carolina, now he can't do anything about being, going to New York, right? He can't do anything about that. But this one is, when you see a fork in the road, remember what Yogi Berra said? When you can make that a little bit bigger, Andy? One more? Thank you. Oh, that's nice. When Yogi Berra, I wish I had a fork in my hand. When Yogi Berra said, when you see a fork in the road, take it. Well, you see the fork in the road here. To the right is South Carolina, and to the left is Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see how many votes Michigan has. They're 3 days apart. You can see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see how many votes Michigan has, 16. You see how many votes South Carolina has, 9. Now this one is 3 days apart. Michigan is a swing state. South Carolina is sure in the bag for the last 10 elections for the Republicans. Where would you spend the most of your time if you were trying to win a fall election against Joe Biden?
Michigan, it seems
Michigan.
like. Yeah.
Michigan.
You got more
This is-
votes. They're more electoral votes.
Yeah, and it's also a swing state for downstream. And I decided to do the graphic this morning and make it as graphically obvious of why Trump should take a left turn at Michigan. Because and again, we have the only real frontline doctor. She's going to be there, so we can reach out to farmers, we can reach out to veterans, right? We can reach out to the medical community. We have people with the medical community coming in. And now you're going to see scenes of Trump in front of the Ford. We have a lot of people that work in the big three auto in network neighborhood news. So we'll have a lot of people we could bring out to the party for Trump. We want Trump to meet Karma Doc, but we want him to meet all these other people that are involved with the big three auto industry. Now, if you keep strolling, there are 3 auto companies in South Carolina. We think he should go there too. Right?
They paid.
But we don't want it. See those stars and bars? This is what the FBI did at Charlottesville. You see those stars and bars, those Confederate flags? This is what they did. They brought in stars and bars. So here are all of our patriots. They're all meeting, and now they bring in the FBI guys, bring in the stars and bars, and now it's a bunch of white supremacists. This is why Joe Biden came out of retirement, because of all these stars and bars flags. Remember? Here's where Trump should go, right there. The Mercedes-Benz factory in Charleston, or go to near Columbia where the BMW factory is, or go to the Volvo factory where you're not going to have stars and bars on the shop floor, and talk to the people who make this stuff and provide the jobs, right? If you want to go to South Carolina. But if you want to come to Michigan, buckle up, in Ohio, because we're going to take you to Jeep in Toledo. We're going to take you to Ford and Dearborn. We're going to take you to Chrysler up by Troy and so forth. We're going to take you to GM, right? What does Dave say here? Helena Abba?
Yeah, he's saying in his counter argument, go to South Carolina. Alina Habba looks prettier in a sundress in a snowmobile suit. So he's saying he wants to see Alina in South Carolina.
There's a lot of Helena Abba pictures out there on the internet. I think that I would rather have the classified documents that Alina Habba has for Trump, in an Albion Al Capone armored car than the car that she had at Trump Bedminster that got broken into. And that's supposedly how the classified documents got out on the market and how they got into Trump's desk. What is Karma Doc saying there?
She's saying she's had a lot of veterans contact her about coming to the Bohm charrette, and as well as a trustee for the Eagles Club in town, and they're going to promote. The Eagles Club is going to promote the event. Yeah,
Boy Scouts, anybody. We had Aaron had a whole slate of things back when we had neighborhood news. Make your kid an engineer, make your kid a doctor, make your kid a farmer. All these things that you find out later. That way they get involved in things and they don't get into the video games, and they don't get into the drugs, and these are all things like 4-H, Carbadoc's a big, she's got all the chickens and and she's helping these kids, and they're all taking care of the animals and stuff. So I think that is a way of engaging youth, and we have a lot of people that believe this in Michigan, right? That want to help and make your kid a farmer, make your kid a doctor, make your kid an engineer. The way to do that is take their phone out of their hands and say, if you don't go and you don't go up and introduce yourself to this Army doctor, right, and find out how the Army can make you a doctor, or find out how the Army can make you a pilot, or find out how the Army can help you learn how to fly helicopters, or learn how to be an electronics technician, or learn how to, be a diver, or whatever. If you don't go do that, you're never getting your phone back. You're never getting your phone back. I'll smash it in front of your eyes, right? Right. If you don't get in that car right now, I will crush this phone. Your child will go into the back seat, and then they go up and introduce themselves, and then you give them the phone back. Watch the next thing they search. It won't be their video games. They'll probably go to their text messages, but then they're going to start becoming interested. Hey, I can fly helicopters. I can fly jets. I can be Carmadoc. Women can't be military doctors, Dad. Oh, yes, they can. Sally, yes, they can. There she is, right there on stage. So this is the thing, right, is building community and by meeting people where you get into a trust network. These aren't fake people that are happening over the internet. They're not fake doctors. They're real doctors. And the same thing with farmers, that we're going to have. Same thing, we have manufacturing people coming to this who work in the big manufacturing camps. This is why it shouldn't just be Laura Trump coming. I know it's going to sound really great. Laura Trump, counteract the Nikki Haley, Trump hates women. Now, here's Laura Trump meeting with Carmadoc. It's got to also be Eric. It's got to also, because he has kids. It's got to also be Don Jr. because he has kids. Don't bring the wife. Don't bring that one, or the girlfriend. You leave her home. Wow. But Donald Trump should come. We'll get his ass down on the line. We'll have him rolling up the things with the safety goggles, and we'll have him zerking bolts on a Ford F-150. And Nikki Haley's down there with the stars and
the Boeing airplanes do need someone zipping bolts. By the way, they've had doors flying off, wheels flying off. Trump,
can I just say something in defense?
Just get people to zip bolts on Boeing jets. That'd be great.
Can I just say something in defense? In defense, there are a lot of people in the electronics industry, and we're not guessing here. The people I'm talking about, who actually make sensors, who make vibration sensors. Some of them were sold to China so that they had anti-vibration technology for their missiles, right? That was one of the companies Hunter Biden sold. I can't remember. It's HELI. Can't remember the name, but who took me by the plant, and who used to work there. That anti-vibration technology could be easily applied to the wheel hubs of the wheels. It could easily be applied to the doors and all the other things, where you get in any kind of mechanical failure, you always get a precursor telltale wave that things are going badly. You start getting the vibration, and then the pilot just returns to base. Don't wait for the wheel to fall off, especially if it's your front landing gear. Go back and say to maintenance, hey, you need to, and put a zerk on these things, and then I'll go take it back up. Pilots cannot see that in the walk around, right? The hub covers the bolts, and they can't see that a bolt's loose, and they can't get into that level. So you're going to have to use some kind of vibration technology. And again, because we go to Detroit, because we learn about the anti-vibration technologies, because we know that Hunter Biden's selling it to China, right? We know a lot more about what they should be talking about in Washington, D.C. than they are. And they're not. They're talking about Hunter Biden and his paintings. They're talking about Hunter Biden and his blow. They're talking about Hunter Biden and his hose. And as long as it's that, you'll never get to the deep state. You'll never, ever get to the deep state. Hunter Biden is not the deep state. He's the Lee Harvey Oswald of the deep state.
The patsy. All right, George Webb. That's 2 hours. Just let the audience know that is Bohm Theater in Albion, Michigan, that we will be having our charrette at, and that'll be the February. What are the exact dates? I lost it.
Just think of South Carolina primary and just think of a left turn at Michigan, right?
February
We're not gonna,
27th, right?
we're 24th. So the 24th. We're not going to fall into the trap on the 24th on Saturday. So you can take your kids on Saturday, 2:30 to 5:30. It's not just going to be an Army military woman doctor. You're going to have a lot of people there from a lot of different industries in Michigan, right? So you're going to be able to take your kids and introduce them to people that will, make them an engineer or a doctor or a pilot or all these other things that Barbie wants to be, right? Instead of Barbie, the, whatever, a lounge dancer.
It's an impressive group of people that show up that are involved with the neighborhood news studio. And once you show up to one of these events, you get to participate in the chats and the emails, and you get to share research. It's a fun group to be a part of community, and that's something we're trying to build here at Neighborhood News. Now, my favorite part of these, my favorite part is picking out the CIA agent that shows up. There's always one or two CIA agents that show up, and you gotta kind of have the eye for it. I didn't at first. Everyone thought I was a CIA agent originally. Now they moved on. They've heard me mumble enough where they're like, "No, he's not. He's not a CIA agent." But that's my favorite part: picking out the Fed.
Yeah, exactly. You do a good job of that. What was that last comment that Carmadoc put up? I did want to say we do have a physician.
You're going to give an opener, a history lesson, and a recruitment for citizen journalism as an opener.
Yes, I am. And I wrote a book called Citizen Journal. We have a printing press somewhere. I could probably print some up, but what I do is I basically show how any person who has had any kind of professional life in any science or any walk of life, you know more than the people that are bringing you stories, no matter, almost without doubt, because of your professional experience. You know more. And the journalists have gotten into this habit of not going out and talking to the experts anymore. They don't talk to the pilots. They don't talk to the doctors. They don't talk to the people that have a PhD in farming. They don't. They just talk to themselves. They have panel discussions. Here's Donnie O'Sullivan talking to Jim Shudo, and she's talking to Poppy Harlow, and she's talking to Sir Fadi, and they're all just talking amongst each other. It's journalists talking. Journalists who don't know anything and have never done anything significant in their lives other than one thing. Donnie O'Sullivan wrote a letter and said, "I think Hillary Clinton should be the headmaster of Queens College, a regent of Queens College." That's all she ever. And then his life's been made. What was that last comment, Andy? I didn't see from.
She said, "Everyone bring a drone."
I think she wants people to look for oil on her land. Don't.
She wants to look for oil on her land.
Well, she does have a potential. I think there's a crown formation on her land, and I think it wouldn't be bad to have McNutt out there with a couple of artillery pieces and just let's do a little sounding.
I found the gas tank a couple times when I was out there.
Oh, did you? Yeah, well, there are things underground, I'm sure. But
built yourself up for free. Sorry about that one.
And we do have a sponsorship available, a citizen journalism sponsorship. But here, you get what I'm saying is we have a physician's assistant. These are people who are basically shadow a surgeon through a surgical process. Sometimes they know more about the surgery actually than the surgeon does, believe it or not, because they work for a lot of different surgeons. So we have a surgeon's single mom in Idaho that wants to come. So if people want to sponsor, and then it's career day. It's kind of like the Barbie movie, only everybody really did become the things that Barbie dresses up as. It's like, here are all the people that actually did it, rather than kind of pretended, right, in their playhouse. These are people that went up and realized their dreams, and she certainly did, this gal in Idaho. So this is the idea, is sponsor or come yourself, be the expert yourself, and share your research. We had Dave from the nuclear industry, the power industry. knows more about it. PhD knows more about it than anybody you could possibly imagine. On and on and on. People that are head of the R&D department for major construction equipment companies, major agriculture equipment companies. These are the types of people that you'll meet when you come there. It's an amazing. It's like the old Greek symposium, in the golden days of Athens, where you brought in the best experts and they all sat around a room and looked at each other and started talking. And that's what, of course, engenders the golden age. And that's what they were trying to recapitulate when they did the Renaissance, right? It created Rome. That symposium concept created Rome. Remember, the Romans are all stupid. They just copied the Greeks, right? And what do they do? They took all of Greek knowledge and they added a sword. Probably not too stupid. And then the whole Renaissance is just redoing what the Romans did with a little bit more of an accent. Right. So that symposium method works, where smart people get together and talk to each other works. And I think that's what you're going to see at Albion. It's going to be a great experience.
That's what's wrong with our government right now. The smart people are not getting together and talking and figuring out what works. All
AOC,
right.
when AOC is your model for smarts on Capitol Hill, you got work to do.
I agree. George Webb, you can find him on Twitter at RealGeorgeWebb1. Make sure you go to the top of his page and hit the Substack link. Subscribe to his Substack, unlike myself. Go to buymeacoffee.com/GeorgeWebb1 and throw some coffee in his cup, or go to paypal.me/GeorgeSwaggart and throw some dough in his pocket. So George Webb likes to travel too. He likes to go to these locations and give you the actual boots on the ground journalistic updates. And he needs some money to do that. So make sure you hit that PayPal link. George Webb, you have a good weekend, and we will see you Monday at 12 o'clock noon Eastern. And I don't know, do you have any more shows going on this weekend?
We have the charrette also coming up in your backyard, Andy, in East Dallas.
I keep getting questions, and we haven't finalized dates and places
1 to 6
and stuff.
1 to 6, and then +1, which is the carryover to the 7.
Okay.
I think it's 1 to 6 or 1 to 7. And then people typically come in whenever they want, but I would come in before the 4th of March, because the 4th of March could see Trump getting the handcuffs in Tanya Chutkan's. And again, that's why we meet beforehand and we tell the American people this. The American people are thinking about what? About Trump in court, about Trump only getting 2 words in against the federal judge and the federal judge shutting him up. That's what's national news today, right? They don't know anything about Tanya Chutkan. They don't know she's an Obama appointee. They don't know that she could put him in jail. No. Is he in Texas?
He's coming to Texas.
When's he coming to Texas?
I'm just hoping he comes to Charette. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I just saw this video earlier, and I was like, I need to play this. Trump.
Well, the campaign, Andy, if you remember the 2020 campaign, the campaign's the time to get your questions in. You saw me ask the question to Don Trump Jr. You saw me talk to Eric Trump Jr. You saw me talk to all the Trumps. I had a senator from Georgia whisper in my ear, right? So, he was going to say, "Oh, we're going to get to the bottom of this," So I can't remember his name. It was a Purdue, the chicken guy. It wasn't the chicken guy, but it was the other Purdue. But you get the idea. Is during the campaign you have access to these folks, and you can get your question in. So that's why we track the campaign. If Trump isn't the be all and end all as far as the misogynism, or he's got too much connection to this group or that group, consider the alternative. Nikki Haley, consider the alternative. Oh, by the way, Liz Cheney just endorsed Nikki Haley. And Reid Hoffman, I met Reid Hoffman. The only way Reid Hoffman could ever be the CEO of LinkedIn is if somebody from the old country, from the old Hoffman LaRoche money, said, we need to get into Silicon Valley. Well, we got that one kind of ne'er-do-well kid who got Fs all through school. Reed, can we put Reed out there? Yeah. He's a lump on a log. Let's put Reed out there. How will we make Reed special? Well, we'll say he's gay, and we'll make pride flags and make him wave the pride flag all the time, constantly. We have him shove the pride flag in all of his employees' face. Great idea. Okay, Reed, and you'll be the guy who gives Nikki Haley the billions. Great, right? That's what they're doing right now. You can see it's counterintelligence operations the DNC is running through Reed Hoffman into the Haley campaign. Haley's not running as a Democrat. I mean, as a Republican. She's running as a DNC operative. That's what people have to realize. So don't fall into the DNC operative tricks. You see, I'm not kidding about this. Gretchen Whitmer just announced a series, and I think Reed Hoffman is her co-host, where she teaches about science and education because she's trying to compete with our idea, right? Called Mr. Potato. Based on Reed Hoffman. Now, I'm not making this up. Gretchen Whitmer just announced a science series with Mr. Potato Reed Hoffman. That's what your kids have to look forward to if you don't bring them to Albion. There's a simple choice here. You can have them be with the cool kids and have them all be doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs and pilots and whatnot, and avionics engineers, or you can get Reed Hoffman. Here you go. I think I'm making it up. I'm not. Here it is.
I thought you were making it up, but I guess
We both agree that
I don't
every
know if you can
Michigander
consider that
deserves an
potato-
opportunity to
potato
go to
apple
college
old,
without
yes.
frying their bank account.
Absolutely. A higher education helps you learn more skills, pursue your passions, and even plant your roots right here in Michigan.
But for too many, college is financially out of reach. That's why I'm so excited to announce an appealing plan.
Oh, I know what you're planning. This year, we will work together to make the first 2 years of community college tuition free for every high school graduate.
That's right, Professor. Michiganders will save an average of $4,000 as they earn their associate's degree, setting them up to earn a bachelor's or start working and earn a bigger paycheck.
Hey, that isn't small potatoes. That's a big deal.
To learn more, make sure you tune in for my State of the State address on January 20th.
That's the best Gretchen Whitmer has looked in years.
Well, there was a team. Let's just say that. There was a team.
This George Webb. Wow.
There was a team. There was a team on that project. But
There's
you get
no
the
one.
idea.
This isn't a troll. Like someone didn't like AI edit this or something.
No.
I believe this was approved.
No, this is Reed Hoffman, DNC. He's funding Gretchen Whitmer. He's just the funnel. It used to be Steve Kirsch. Steve Kirsch used to be the guy. Now Steve Kirsch is the pretend Republican getting all the money from the backs injured. They're going to have a big thing in February 24th, right? As we're doing this in Michigan, they're going to have a party for all the people who've been backs injured so they can get 90% and 95% contingencies on everybody's backs injury, right? So that's what Steve Kirsch is doing. But Reed Hoffman now has become the replacement vehicle for the DNC laundering all the money into these different political campaigns. And this is I can see them sitting down going, how are we going to, they had this problem when they put Reed Hoffman in as the CEO of LinkedIn. How are we going to make Reed special? He's a potato, right? Well, let's make him gay. Let's have him wave all the gay flags. Okay, great. But now what do? Well, let's just have him play the role of a potato, right? He doesn't need any acting training. He's made for the part. And there you go. Now you have Reed Hoffman.
And here's a nice list of congressional candidates that Reed Hoffman has donated to. And he does some overall donating to like Democratic Party of Virginia, Maine, all the different states, as well as individual candidates as well. So he's a big funder of the Democratic Party.
But don't get, just think of Reed Hoffman as sort of like one of the kids that Hoffman Roche was trying to get out, so that they had a place to put their money after. And last thing I'll say is Basel. I've been to Basel. This is where Sanofi put LSD into the Rhine. That happens every day. Hey, This was the storehouse left from the chemical weapons that the Nazis had stored that Sanofi had, and then they just said, "Well, hell, I'm going to make a market for this. Just let's just dump it in the Rhine, see if everybody gets hallucinogenic." So, and anyway, you have the whole rise of LSD, and Timothy Leary in the United States popularized LSD. But you can see why it's so important to have popular figures. If you're Hoffman Roche sitting on 10,000 gallon tanks of LSD, everybody says, well, you should destroy that. Not at Hoffman Roche. And remember, Hoffman Roche is two triangles like this sitting on the Rhine, right? Two triangular buildings in Basel. That was the ground zero for what they call the Khmer Rouge plan. And not the Khmer Rouge. Sorry, it was the Maison Rouge.
He donated to Letitia James as well.
The Maison
$47,000.
I write about this in one of my books, and I went to Strasbourg, the Maison Rouge plan. But the Maison Rouge plan was, let's take all the old bioweapons in the 10,000 gallon tanks we have and go into the pharmaceutical companies. They did the same thing with the Unit 731 guys. They all became executives in companies like GC Pharma. BARDA just made a huge order for the recombinant technology, right, for the anthrax vaccine, of the original Bruce Ivins technology that he showed in Winchester in 1989. BARDA just bought the GC Pharma. They're taking Bruce Ivins' recombinant technology from 1989. BARDA just bought the latest anthrax vaccine on his technology. All you have to do is follow the people they kill, and you're always going to be right. You're always going to be right. You're right with the bacteriophages, with the gamma bacteriophage, and you're right with the vaccines. You're always going to be right if you follow the dead bodies. So Reid Hoffman, I've always believed, came out of some kind of charmed existence. He had some kind of, overlord or some, rich uncle that said, hey, we'll get you started in Silicon Valley. We need to populate Silicon Valley, and we need to come up with some kind of story of how you're a smarty in order for you to get all the information. LinkedIn is a professional group where you identify all your friends, right? And that's intelligence gathering. That's how it works. Well, you got to have some kind of benefit to the people to go in and give up all their information, which is getting jobs, right? This is how you get jobs, if you put your resume out on the internet. But it's also a great way of mapping social networks. I work for the companies that did it, so I know what the hell they did, and I know who the hell they sold their data to. Reid Hoffman's got a T92 channel straight to the CIA, pumping all this information, not only the information that you see publicly, but then the information that you privately send to each other when you're going for recruiting. And where that's important is, if I want to take down a deplorable, I know when they're going to go interview. I can just leave a little note. I can leave a little note on their desk saying, oh, by the way, you shouldn't hire this person. I know something about him. It's horrible. Right while the guy's being interviewed, and you destroy his life. So, and that happens. That's part of the next generation COINTELPRO that does happen in America. Very light touch. All I needed to do is write a little note saying, you shouldn't hire this person. It's the worst person in the world. I'm warning you. And just leave that on the guy's desk, and he sees it the next morning. Have a cleaning lady leave it. How did he know? How did he know that person was interviewing? I've had this happen where the CEO has taken me out. There was a company in Silicon Valley, and I did the aptitude test. They had me do this aptitude test. I scored it. I want to meet this guy. He came down, he met me, brought me into his office, literally got out of his cabinet, his liquor cabinet, like this, Paraport, like special. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't Paraport, because that was Australia. I remember that happening once. But that's what a CEO does when they want to bring you into the club. They don't bring you into your office and share a drink with you out of their special liquor cabinet, right? If they're not interested in hiring you and they don't want you to accept the job. They don't want you for the job. They say, get out, right? I don't care about you. But when they bring you in the next morning, 8:00, we're not interested anymore, right? That's the power of knowing the LinkedIn information. I just leave a little note. This isn't the guy you want to do business with. Bad guy. Done. you queer that guy's ability to get a job. You do that 5 or 6 or 7 times, right? You keep somebody from working. That's how you do low intensity warfare. I don't have to kill anybody. I don't have to ram anybody with a car. I don't have to push anybody over a building. I don't have to squirt anything into their air filter. It's all light touch. Just a pen. Little note at the right time. At the right time. I can put my people in and get rid of the people I don't want. Sina Bavari ends up running, works with Bruce Ivins, and ends up running Fort Detrick 20 years later. And all the technology Bruce Ivins is working on gets exfiltrated through Jens Kuhn and Tunnel Services with Sina Bavari. And Bob Malone, 3 patents with Sina Bavari. Anyway, I got to get to court, Andy. I'm sorry. I'm going over. I apologize.
All right, George Webb. That was some great work you did today. We do have a long weekend ahead of us, so it's okay if you go a little bit over. Make sure you can catch up on George's weekend whereabouts on Twitter at RealGeorgeWebb1. Or if there's some bombshell news, we might do a surprise show. But I gotta have some bombshell stuff with the way I'm feeling right now. But we will see you Monday, officially at 12 noon Eastern, back here on Neighborhood News Network. George Webb, you have a great weekend, and ladies and gentlemen of the audience, always remember that blackberries matter.
Started seeing like blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries. They were blackberries. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment.
That folder, I cannot find it.